Thank you very much indeed. It's an absolute thrill to be here. I've been speed dating all day from one geopolitical issue and one huge topic here in Davos to the next as well. But anyone who knows me knows that sustainability, in fact, the two next panels I'm on food security a little bit later on, but also sustainability are the causes closest to my heart, and actually in how businesses and society and governments and just about all of us can move in the right direction and do it profitably as well. It doesn't have to be something that falls by the wayside of growth, because as we know, from every single government, whether it's across the EU, whether it's in the United States, whether it's across Asia, growth is absolutely pivotal. But at the same time, we need to keep on track with Paris. And keeping on track with Paris is proving very difficult. Let's be honest about it. We are failing so far. But how can we do it? And how can we do it profitably as well? So keeping on course to reach net zero. But I really want to emphasize over the next hour or 45 minutes to an hour that actually it doesn't have to be at the expense of profit. And with that in mind, I just want to say a couple more points. 1 in 6 of the world's largest companies aren't even bothering to meet their own targets at the moment. They're not on track to meet their own targets. How do they stay the course? Well, there's a whole host of reasons, isn't there? They need better investments, better innovations, private partnerships, collaboration, all of these elements put in to try and meet net zero goals by 2050 as well. What I want to do, though, is start off with a conversation with a man who, he's already said one thing to me, which I really resonate with as well. He said, look, these are complex issues. Let's not try to eliminate complexity. Let's actually go into the granular detail. And when we do that, we'll be more knowledgeable and we'll make greater strides as well. So with that in mind, I want to welcome to the stage Amma Paul, who is the President of North America Operations at Schneider Electric. Nice to see you. So this is complex. And people who try to make it very simple very often say, we have to do this or we have to do this. And I'm not here to say nice things about Schneider Electric, but one thing I do know...
You can, though.
I can, and I probably will. But under the various managements that I've had the pleasure of working with at Schneider Electric over the last 10 years, one thing that's become very, very clear: you can create a stunningly profitable company and really make great strides on sustainability as well. I think you've just been named again, this company, for one of the most...
By Corporate Knights as the most
sustainable company in the world. Tell us a little bit how you do that and you remain profitable.
Look, I think the most important thing is we think about sustainability as a process of identifying and reducing waste in our system. And we can talk about all sorts of labels, but when you approach it that way, any basis of continuous improvement in any system is about that. Identify the waste, deploy the process, eliminate it, start over. And that's what we've been doing across the system in our own operations and with our customers and partners. And some things we try work exceptionally well, some things don't work, and we learn and we iterate. But that journey to say it's about the work and not about sort of certain, goals or virtues, I think that combination has made a real impact to how we operate. And the last thing I'd say is this idea that doing the right thing and being financially successful are at odds, I think we've proven is not true. And we're even more excited that we're proving that with our customers. So our customers are using that technology to both be good and do well.
Where are you finding it hardest to explain to people that they can go on this journey, but they need to invest and they can reap stunning gains as well? It seems to me from what you've just said, it's a no-brainer. You can do both. Where's the biggest barrier to this?
I think what most people get concerned about is the same thing they get concerned about with change management of any kind, which is we've always done it this way. And there's a risk mitigation to that. And, go to any AI panel that you'll have over the next few days. What do people talk about? They say that technology is not the barrier. The barrier is the change aversion that any processor company has. So we can talk about, energy vectors and supply-side mix. We can talk about the grid. We can talk about, how people are thinking about technologies. But I will dismiss all of that in favor of the fact that it is the change management inside the organization that is true for AI transformation. It's true for sustainability transformation. I'll give you one example. We have a facility in Lexington, Kentucky that is 64 years old. Governor Beshear is here. We're going to spend some time with him. We decided in this facility to start giving our people the people on the ground who've worked in that facility access to these technologies. We gave them a small budget and we said, go iterate. After 5 years, that 64-year-old facility is a World Economic Forum sustainability lighthouse. And it got there because they started experimenting. So the most important step in a sustainability journey is to begin and start driving the experiments. And if you're afraid of doing something big, start with something that feels more manageable. But start, because you'll learn so much more by doing than having the debate.
And I think, look, we're not going to get into politics. I promise you, we're not. I don't need to. I'm having too many of those conversations anyway. But that is a great example of how you talk to the client as well. It can be Kentucky, it can be Texas.
Absolutely.
It can be somewhere in Boston as well. And you've given me some really interesting examples as well. If you talk to people in the language that they understand about the profitability of this and actually what it's going to save you as well, and how it's going to actually avert a lot of the potential risks from not doing it, it doesn't matter about the politics. It doesn't matter whether it's red or blue. It doesn't matter whether it's Labour or Conservative in this country as well. So you need to talk to people in their own language as well. And I know it sounds a silly little thing, but I think it's actually really important, rather than going, we want you to be more sustainable, we want you to be greener. That might turn off a lot of people in southern United States. But actually, if you talk to them in terms of what this is going to do for you, that's really important, isn't it? So it's how you talk to people.
We were talking about how all of us keep up, right? Just the human aspect of being well and being resilient and keeping up these demanding schedules, right? A lot of that is about eating healthy, getting enough sleep, blah, blah, blah. Basic things that we all told to do, that it's harder to do consistently over a period of time. I think most of the time, change management and how we drive people to drive the right outcomes in their organization is about getting the basics right. And you're exactly right. We, to quote Jean Pascal, we are not optimists, we're not pessimists, we're activists. So we believe in doing the work and beginning. And I think the biggest call to action, whether it's companies, communities, individuals, is begin the work, invest, and learn iteratively. And I think that's the fastest way to make an impact.
And I think all the best technologies, you only have to walk up the top drag here. And I've been here many, many years. And, one year it's SPACs. Another year it's Bitcoin. Another year it's cloud. And this year, as you all know, it's AI. And it's set to be so, I guess, for the next couple of years as well. So you're also at the same time embracing these. You have some core amazing technologies, but actually the latest zeitgeist is also part of what you're selling to them as well. So by emphasizing for some people the latest shiny thing in AI and actually giving them practical applications, that's really important as well, isn't it?
It is. And look, 70% of the technology that we have, or the technology we have will get us 70% of the way there in terms of our decarbonization goals. So first headline is this is not a technology availability problem. The technology we need to make substantial progress exists today. Coming back to AI, AI is about using data in a more effective way with agents that help you solve certain process problems. So let's break that down a little bit back to the complexity point. What do you need? You need good contextualized data. You need a good understanding of your process. You need clear goals of what you're trying to optimize. And then what AI allows you to do is do micro adjustments much faster than human intervention would allow you to do. The foundation of that is building digital infrastructure. And that's something we've been talking about for a very long time.
Well, yes,
digitizing
exactly.
Your enterprise.
Yeah, let me just jump in there as well. When I've had my conversations with, again, the managers, the CEOs, the chairmen of Schneider Electric over the years as well, I don't recall up until maybe 12 months ago mentioning AI. I do recall lots of Internet of Things. I do recall lots of digitization. I do recall lots of automation conversations as well. And what I guess I'm pointing at is you were doing all these things without actually saying, yeah, that's AI.
Yeah, and look, I think the mechanism of generative AI gives you a way to query data that is different and new, and we can add that on top. But you're not going to query if you don't have good structured data. You're not going to query and deploy it if you don't have process. So you're exactly right. We've had the privilege with Aviva to build one of the largest industrial software companies in the world. We're super excited about bringing that capability. We think sustainability or efficiency is an outcome of digital transformation of energy and automation. And that's exactly what we're able to do. So we've been on that journey for a long time. Our customers are reaping the benefits, and AI is just going to catalyze that even more.
Can I just ask you one question about ecosystems as well? And it's something again, had this conversation many, many times as well, but taking an ecosystem with you as well, that's really important for Schneider Electric, isn't it?
It is, because take AI, right? One of the big debates right now is the amount of energy a data center will use when generative AI is being deployed. And there's a lot of conversation, whether it's in places like Ireland or even parts of the US, where the grid and the grid stability as we deploy this capacity is a concern. So that's one issue. At the same time, that AI capability redeployed into industries, homes, transport systems can allow for so much aggregated efficiency that over time that incremental load is optimized. But that conversation can happen with a singular company. It can't even happen with a series of companies. It is public sector, private sector, industry movement. So partnerships are critical to the collaboration, which is why the theme of this event makes so much sense.
I want to ask you about government policy a little bit as well, without, again, getting into politics, if I can do that. We are seeing, there was a headline out of the UK today. Here you go, I'll find that one as well. We'll get it, which is a relief to your team, because I'm not mentioning headlines out of the United States. Here it is economic growth must trump, bad word, economic growth must trump net zero, signals Reeves in split with Miliband being the energy secretary. This is a Daily Telegraph in the UK. Economic growth has to trump other things, prioritise economy over cutting carbon emissions. How much does that infuriate you?
I think it's just misguided, because if you want to have the most efficient, competitive system, you want to have as little waste in your system as possible. You want to optimize your system as much as possible. You want to be deploying continuous improvement strategies. Mm-hmm. And when you do those things, those two things are not at odds, right? There are very few long-term capital investments at a public policy level that you can talk about in terms of source energy mix or grid investments that you can have a certain debate about. But for 90% of the efficiency outcomes you're trying to drive, that trade-off just doesn't exist because you're doing the same things anyway. And I think what good government policy should be doing is incentivizing, especially small and medium enterprises that maybe don't have the resources to go faster and lean into that direction. And I think if we can get, the average citizen to do the right thing without compromising their quality of life and making it more cheaper for them, if we can get SMBs to do it, that critical mass that you can catalyze, which only governments can do, can make a big difference. So I understand the sentiment, but I think a lot of it doesn't have to create that conflict.
No. In terms of the biggest barriers as well, and I don't want to end this on a negative note as well, but what do you find the most challenging thing? Again, we've talked a little bit about naivety and about not understanding the complexity as well. What are you finding is the biggest challenge to sell the message, actually, that it can be both?
So one is just change management. I already talked about that. The other, I spent the first part of my career in the tech sector, and I think the tech sector, and I love the tech sector, does an incredible job of getting people excited about a future that doesn't yet exist. And the industrial sector invents the future and forgets to tell people about it. So I think we have to do collectively, all of us, a better job.
That's interesting, and I know I've got to move on, but the technology sector, it does a brilliant job of selling people a future that doesn't exist. And that's a really important takeaway right at the end here as well. The industrial sector
invents the future and forgets to tell people about it.
Is not as smart as the PR.
Yeah. And by the way, look, that's part of my job. So basically, I'm telling you, I need to do my job better, which is what today is about. But I think I'll go back to that point. 70% of our carbon reduction goals can be achieved with the technologies we have today that are commercially available and viable and deliver economic returns and timelines that would make most CFOs happy.
Yeah.
That's the headline.
Brilliant. Well, let's leave it at that. I have to move on because the lady in my ear who I took out of my ear yesterday tells me that we need to crack on as well. So,
well, thank you very much.
Ilham Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure meeting you. President of North America Operations at Schneider Electric. Thank you, sir. Indeed. Well, we've got an absolutely fantastic panel for you, actually, really top-notch, coming up in a couple of moments' time. What I'm going to do is just, in the meantime, give you a little scene-setter video of the message we're trying to get across here today.
Since the signing of the Paris Agreement, countries and businesses across the globe have set numerous net zero targets. Renewable energy is being added to the energy system at an unprecedented rate. And the IEA projects the next 5 years will see the fastest growth yet. However, global population and energy consumption continue to rise, resulting in increased worldwide emissions. The private sector has a vital role to play in achieving net zero, but many companies are falling behind. According to a recent Accenture report, only 1 in 6 of the world's largest companies are currently on track to meet their targets, while almost half are seeing a rise in carbon emissions.
Trying to transform a fundamental system at a pace is costing an awful lot of money without much effect.
The increasing pressure on companies to be environmentally responsible brings several challenges. Creating sustainable supply chains and operations often takes time and significant investment. Current macroeconomic and geopolitical uncertainty can also slow down the rate of progress. What are the initiatives, investments and technologies helping companies increase energy efficiencies and decarbonize to meet their net zero goals? The debate also continues on whether power-hungry AI will be a friend or foe in the climate crisis.
We're looking at consumption of electricity doubling within data centers over the course of the next few years.
AI is also fast becoming a game changer in both climate sustainability and measuring climate risk.
How vital are government policies and regulations when it comes to sustainability efforts?
The SEC is talking about transparency on climate for companies. The EU has passed legislation for transparency. So we're moving in that direction, and we have the tools to do it. Governments need to mandate it.
Significant milestones are in sight, and with many missed targets already, companies across the globe must accelerate and scale their decarbonisation plans to meet their climate pledges, securing a more sustainable future for us all. Welcome to CNBC's IoT, powering the digital economy debate as we focus on keeping on course to reach net zero.
So that was to fill time to obviously put the chairs in, but we got the point, didn't we, as well? How do we keep on track? There are so many challenges, and there was a word in there as well, or 2 words, which made me think it was power hungry. That covers a lot of ground, doesn't it, power hungry? Anyway, let me get this panel on stage as well, and we can get into some real detail on this one as well. I can see straight away someone I've loved debating with for many years, on and off camera. Ilham Kadri is the CEO of Syensqo. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Katherine Garrett Cox is there as well. I can see the CEO of GIB Asset Management and chair of CDP Worldwide. Lovely to see you, Katherine. Sanda Ojiambo, someone I've loved chatting to as well, CEO and Executive Director of the UN Global Compact. Always a pleasure. And somebody I've never met before, but I reckon he's going to be really going for a good conversation, is Scott Jacobs, who is from Generate Capital. Scott, lovely to see you as well. And the best panels are the ones that I don't talk too much in. The best panels are the ones with these experts, because we heard from Amma Paul as well, that actually there's nothing wrong with having experts talking about stuff. We don't have to make everything stunningly simple. It is important to have a degree of complexity so we can get down to the deep, meaningful issues. Like in no meaningful order, but I'm going to start with Ilham because she's next to me as well. Then we'll move down the line. I'm going to ask you just a really easy opening question, and we'll go from there as well. I think it's really tough to stay on track. We know that we're not on track for 1.5. We're not on track for anything really at the moment as well. It's challenging as well. But the question is keeping on course to reach net zero. How do we keep on course to reach net zero? And I will ask the same question all the way down the line, and then we'll digest some of the points. Ilham.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. It's not easy, you're right, because there is no harmonized regulation. There is not a single carbon pricing around the world, and Trump administration just walking away from the Paris Accords. I'm sure we'll come back to that. Listen, for our company like Schneider Electric before here, it's not about just sustainability for charity. We are doing it. Of course, we have values because we want to leave a better planet for our kids. But sustainability means profitability. I give you one data point. I had the honor to lead a company called Solvay, a 160-year-old company who is representative of the hard to abate. We were using coal, etc. We cut our emission twice what Paris required us since 2019 while doubling our returns. Doubling them, right? Almost doubling them. So I think for us, it's about cutting the waste, the bad costs, is about taking that cash and reinvesting it. And actually, one of the magic inside our company is that we had an internal carbon pricing. We didn't wait for the regulator. We were taxing ourselves from the right pocket, the left pocket, and then we trained the muscle, right? And we started understanding where we can be good at. Number two, climate change means physical risks. When you put your enterprise risk management, you have to look at risks around your manufacturing sites. We're a manufacturing company. Look at what's happened in LA. Look at Texas. He talks about that. There was an energy island in Texas, right? Because the grid was not stable, so our plant couldn't operate anymore, which means losing business, losing your customers. So it's about physical risks. And you have to mitigate, you have to adapt to build resilience. That's also important. Any businessman or woman would want to protect your property, right? And I can go on. So I made it a podcast, I'm making some publicity, and it's the future, A&D, sustainability and profitability.
But in terms of how it's being painted, and I'll walk around the politics at the moment as well, but it seems to me that Europe is pushing ahead.
Yeah.
China is pushing ahead in its own way, although it's got its own issues of getting to net zero, and we know they've got a huge reliance on coal as well. But why is this being painted as a transatlantic divide, do you think, as well? Europe regulates, US innovates, Europe has windmills, the US has LNG. Why is it being painted so simplistically as that?
I think, unfortunately for Europe, Europe had, a noble perspective and a target called Green Deal, but they messed it up with the how over the past 5 years because we lost in competitiveness. So Europe now, the big elephant in the room, and I was happy to hear President Ursula von der Leyen yesterday to talk about competitiveness, specifically for my industry. Again, I'm representing the chemical industry, the hard to abate. It's not a sexy industry, but we are the mother of all industries.
Yeah,
without us, nothing works. So we need competitiveness to keep jobs and to keep manufacturing. To give you a data point, 11 million tons capacity shut down in Europe between 2023 and 2024. This is 4% of the capacity available in Europe. So obviously, the skeptic can say, look at Europe, it doesn't work, So we are not debating the what, but the how, and thank you for starting by saying you need experts sometimes to talk about the stuff.
You experts daunt me, but I still like to listen to you.
No, but bring experts under the tent, right, to discuss the how. Yeah. If the how is messy, you will never get the what. And by the way, it's not a linear, path. So listen, I hope that Europe is going to fix it. I think the Trump election and the new administration is a wake-up call, another one for Europe. And hopefully with the 28 regime and whatever Ms. President talked about it yesterday is going to help Europe to rebuild competitiveness. I think because the energy price in Europe is 4 times higher than the US. So if we don't do something different, industry is going to leave.
But I mean, we talk about Trump and we have a different view of him over this side of the Atlantic. I get that, but and he comes across in an extraordinary manner and is an extraordinary let me do a poll. Here, I've completely changed things. Everybody in this room, including you, who thinks Trump could be good for Europe? Not many. I'm going to put my I'm going to put my hand up. I think it acts as a galvanizing factor.
Absolutely.
Who thinks Trump will be bad for Europe? It's probably about half. And some of you don't want to put your hand up.
Yeah.
Sorry, did I not tell you this is an interactive panel? I'm doing this every couple of minutes. No, don't worry, but I get the point. I mean, it's pretty even as well. Katherine Garrett Cox as well. Why is it so difficult to remain on track?
Well, I think it's a classic case of sometimes these questions just seem almost insurmountable. They just seem too big. And so
every marathon, one little step.
Exactly. So what I was going to say is actually, I think one of the great things about the annual meeting and the many conversations we all have is that it's really evident that everybody is doing something. So, there are some basic things that I think we need to keep on track. We absolutely, from a private sector perspective, given the sort of importance of the private sector in tackling climate change, we absolutely need to make sure that we've got clear targets, that we've got roadmaps, that we've got mechanisms like CDP to hold people to account against what they're doing. There are also some very practical things. We need to both, look at our emissions, reduce them. We need to, inside corporates, have a strong culture around tackling these big issues, such as climate change. And I think most importantly, and I have seen this shift actually in the few years that I've now been coming to the annual meeting, but there seems to be better levels of understanding within the boardroom. Why do I say that matters? Because it's all very well and good if we as CEOs sit and say this is important, but if you don't have the air cover and support and encouragement from your board of directors, it's just not going to happen. So I definitely think that is important. I think the other thing that I've definitely seen a shift on, but I have hope, despite some of the sort of black moments that we're all facing right now, is to say it is definitely shifting, and these topics are being more and more embedded within corporate strategy. You know, I think long gone are the days where it's stuck on the side as a bit of an afterthought. There is most definitely this sense that I'm observing that I actually liken it to probably about 10, 15 years ago, we'd come to this gathering and everyone would say diversity, and you'd have a chief diversity officer and they'd be sort of some sad person stuck far down the promenade. That then got embedded into the corporate, the DNA, the structure, the strategy. I think the same thing is going to happen with sustainability. So in some corporates, we're seeing sustainability very much embedded as part of the strategy. But, you know, we were just discussing just in the green room that you can't tack it on. It needs to be something that you sign up to, that you measure,
I've
that you
spoken
track.
to two companies who is part of their DNA, Syensqo and Schneider as well. We'll come back to that because I think you both made some great points as well. But you talk about in the DNA and it's got to be understood at the boardroom level. My worry is at the shareholder level at the moment as well. And I think there's a problem that Mark Carney's been having as well. Sanda Ojiambo, you are the director or executive director of the UN Global Compact, which is the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative as well. How do you ignore political cycles? And you are not going to get involved in talking about individual companies, and you're not going to get involved about talking about US political cycles. But you have to ignore it, and that's tough.
Well, I don't think you fully ignore it, but you have to, you have to be cognizant that politics is at play. If I was going to respond to your initial question, which was, why haven't we made enough progress?
Yeah, sorry, I did say that I was going to ask you the initial question, and then I've obviously asked the supplementary first, but it's by the way my mind's working. So why aren't we on target, and then we can answer the one about political cycles.
And I mean, if I was to think about it, and I'm happy to respond to either, but I do think the fact that climate and many other issues have become political issues. And I think you can't ignore, no matter where you are in the world, the biggest chasm, I'm not actually going to focus on the US, is actually the North-South divide.
Yes.
I think that piece of tension at a global level is one that
But it always has been, hasn't it, Sanda? When I was in Paris at COP21, when I was in Glasgow at COP26, when I was in Dubai, it's always been the North-South divide.
It has. And what has that stifled? It stifled the adequate flow of capital. It stifled, technology exchanges. It's broken trust. And literally has sort of built an undercurrent where climate is an issue that is a totally North-South piece. And so for me, you can't ignore the politics, but you have to work within it. And I think that's why, forums like this, what we do at the UN, provide an opportunity to look at, what are the ways in which we can harness a couple of things that I spoke about this earlier. I think for me, there's 4 things that we need to go back to before we go forward. I think we need to go back to the science. Science and facts have been pushed to the side for a while, and it's very clear. Katherine is with CDP, the Global Compact, and CDP are some of the co-founders of the Science-Based Targets Initiative. We know that companies that do use a science-based pathway to decarbonize do so 2 times as fast as others. So let's get back to science. Let's then get back to affordable capital. And it goes back to the point. I mean, Ilham's spoken about her company. There's lots of companies, and if I go back to the North-South divide, lots of opportunities in the South, but they can't access capital in the same way. If you can't, you just can't make the progress that you need to. We need to go back to collaboration. It's a fractured world. Collaboration within industries, public-private collaboration, et cetera, most important. And I always say, then we need to go back to the future, because at the heart of it is really the next generation, the future generation. And they're speaking loud about what their concerns are. And at some point, that's going to turn into a ballot. That's going to turn into social unrest, and that's where we go back to the politics. So you can't ignore the politics, but we need to go back to some fundamentals.
It was very interesting that what Paul had to say from Schneider about selling a vision of tomorrow that doesn't exist yet as well. It's quite difficult, isn't it? So you've got to sell people a vision of something that it's going to be expensive. It's going to be a tough journey. You are shaking your head expensive. I like that. You're getting into the spirit of things already, Scott. I like that. But okay, there is a cost to it. There is a change of lifestyle to it. There is a bravery to it. Selling a vision of something compared to what you have now, people get very scared about that, don't they?
Well, yes, but then you listen to Ilham and her fantastic story. And I'd love to quote Jesper Brodin, who's the vice chair of our board at the UN Global Compact. He's the CEO of the Inca Group, IKEA. And, I think they released their results today. He's spoken about it, so I don't think I'm breaching their results. But they have grown they have reduced their carbon footprint by 30%, well on track to where they needed to be. And they have grown by 24%. So they've demonstrated that you can decouple your economic growth and your carbon footprint or your climate footprint. And so, there's what is scary about a company that is doing well, that is resource smart, that has an engaged workforce, and that is, sustainable.
But as I said to his predecessor when I went to COP21, and I sat to him I said, having to walk around the whole store to buy candles and things you don't want to buy, is that sustainable? but I get the point about the company as well, and they've made great strides with their energy usage as well. Scott Jacobs, I liked your shaking your head. First of all, answer the original question, and then you can tell me why it's not expensive.
Well, I think there's far too much misinformation. There are real headwinds based on what we're seeing, obviously, in the macro environment and also in the geopolitical environment. I think those are actually some of the most significant because that affects capital flows. Back to uncertainty about the future, that's risk to an investor. And we do need $9 trillion a year to get to net zero, according to McKinsey. $9 trillion a year doesn't get mobilized in the face of uncertainty, no matter what else is happening. But I think it's also really important not only to focus on the science and the next generation, as we just heard, which are great points. We have to focus on the customer. The financiers aren't driving the transition. The policymakers aren't driving the transition. The technologists are not driving the transition. It's customers, communities, human beings who have a problem to solve. They're the ones driving the transition. And, I go back to sort of business 101. If you solve a problem for a customer, you usually get paid, right? And so that actually highlights the main point, which is whether or not this is economic. Is this in the rational self-interest of the decision maker to do it? And we've seen for 2 decades increasing numbers of folks who understand it is in their rational self-interest to make these transitions. 94% of the new energy capacity on the US grid last year that was added was renewables. It's because it's the cheapest form of power. Don't listen to anything else. Just look at the facts. Just look at these decision makers who are making their decisions based on their rational self-interest, which is typically an economic self-interest. Sometimes they're interested in resilience and making long-term investments in being more resilient. Sometimes they are altruistic, but most of the time, and almost all of the time really, it has to come down to an economic value proposition.
Katherine, come in.
No, if I may, Steve, I'd love to come in on this. Because...
Please, from now on, don't ask permission, just jump in.
Okay. No, I really wanted to sort of, I think, build on your comment about how you unlock the capital and what needs to happen, and the fact that the consumer and customer is at the heart of it. One part of the conversation we don't often have is, what is the gender lens on this topic in terms of unlocking finance? And one of the things that we do know is that typically female-led businesses are much more concerned about this topic. And now that's a very broad generalization, but if we can find a way to unlock that, that would be significant. And the reality is that gender lens investing is still very nascent. I think the stats are that although gender lens investing has grown by 30% in the last 2 years, it still only accounts for about $8 billion of private market investment. And that is against a total market of around 13 trillion. So there are some very practical unlocks here. If we can help, and then obviously small companies become bigger companies, become public companies. I think if we could get that flywheel really spinning faster, that is a way to
before all of you come in, you're all going to get on the other. I hope you notice we're a gender-led panel, by the way. Yeah? It's great, isn't it? After too many years, I've been up this hill talking to grey-haired blokes like me, so it's fantastic. So I applaud you all. Ilham's going to come in, then Scott, and then Sanda.
So responding to Scott about the customers, right? I mean, when I talked about our experiments within Solvay, it's obviously scope 1 and 2. So within our walls, we decarbonize our assets. But then when we become a scope 3, so you are the sustainable supplier to your customers, right? And you need to trace carbon. You need to give them low carbon solutions. someone has to pay for it. And investment go with, is the market real? Can I win? Is it worth it? If there is no demand, there will be no investments. So look at EV. If the US now is walking away from EV and our customers are delaying our investments, I will delay my investments because it doesn't make sense. So creating that demand, specific, including in Europe, where they were promoting this, they didn't put the infrastructure around, be it charging stations on the road, right? Be it incentives, rights, etc. China is a state economy. They have a very robust EV and hybrids economy, and we're there actually. So I think creating demand is crucial for the industry.
I think the demand is there, and it's there in pockets for sure. It's always dangerous to paint with broad brushstrokes when you're talking about multi-trillion-dollar, very complex systems made up of very deep and detailed sorts of sectors of the economy. But to link some of these points, misinformation and the gender point that we just heard, there's a human capacity problem. And I think we are seeing the human capacity problem get solved through intergenerational transition of power, frankly. There are people that have been educated about these issues from early days that aren't the baby boomer generation that have been sitting in these boardrooms or that control the shareholder allocations of capital. And more, it's those people that are frankly around 40 or younger who are making these decisions.
Sanda comes, I'm more worried about misinformation now than I have been in years, though. And I've got to say, I wonder whether the algorithm is part of it, whether AI is part of the problem as well. I just spoke to the Spanish Prime Minister this morning about his concern about misinformation coming from, amongst other places, X. And I said to him, does that worry you then that you've got the most powerful man in technology who happens to be the most wealthy man in the world, who has the ear of the most powerful man in the world? Does that combination worry you? He had one word. He said, yeah, it's weird. I mean, it doesn't, it's kind of, you couldn't make this stuff up, could you? So what I should be worried about misinformation, shouldn't I? Even though the younger generation are smart cookies and teach me how to do my Insta.
And they're also subject to these information bubbles that we're seeing and these very limited ecosystems of information that are really challenging. And so we have to pierce through it by actually talking about the facts and talking about the proofs, right? Davos is rife with platitudes and promises and pledges, and climate is kind of the worst example of where the narrative has been dominated by what you might do or what you intend to do or what you will do in the future. What we've been doing for the last 11 years at Generate is showing people how to do it, making sure they understand exactly what they've done. And now the reason I'm here is to share some of those proofs. People are making money every single day by making these transitions.
I tell you what we'll do. Hold the thought. I want you'll give me your best example in a moment. I want Sanda to come in now first, though.
Right. So just on the investment piece, and you're right. I mean, there's all sorts of numbers that will be put out there in terms of what is needed, and it can be overwhelming. And that's just climate. There's 16 other SDGs we want to talk about. But there's two sort of lenses that I wanted to bring to that. One was, I think it's always easier to just look at the cost of inaction. And if we just look at LA and the fires we've had, I think the estimates are that it's close to over, is it 200 billion or so that has been lost in assets, whereas a 20 billion investment at that early stage could have perhaps prevented everything that we've seen. So perhaps it's, and it's a bit dreary to have to look at it that side, but I think, breaking down some of these numbers into, if you had done this, you would have been here, I think is one practical. Two, because we're here talking about technology, and I don't know the answer to this.
It's the greatest insurance policy, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's not about paying a premium. If by building this infrastructure, by creating this support network, actually is the best insurance policy rather than paying for insurance. You create these great new networks.
Yeah. And the second piece, and I don't know the answer to this, but the figures that we have, I wonder whether if we threw a technology lens over them, those costs would look different, feel different. I don't know, with all of the AI solutions we've heard about over time. And the third is, I think I look at a climate investment not as a standalone. Climate is so interlinked to many other areas. It's a gender investment. It's an energy investment. It's a, and so it's daunting what we need to achieve. But I just sort of want to focus on, the benefits. And as you say, we need action right now, just determined action.
I think you're all looking. Does anyone want to come in before I go on?
Yeah,
with
well,
this?
I was actually just going to sort of counter the platitudes, which I think is very evident in many conversations here.
And I love coming here, because I get to meet doers as well as talkers.
Well, I think
But we all know that the WEF and a lot of these organisations, these events we go to, they are guilty of talking a good book but doing very little.
And I think that is exactly the point, is that when you look at CDP, which is basically about data, so, for 25 years, we've been the central sort of depository of information about what companies are doing on these topics. So to your point about, there are lots of people who talk about stuff, but CDP is one of those organizations who holds companies to account. So 2/3 of the global market cap now reports against CDP. Amazing companies, obviously sort of fight to be top of the rankings. But that is one way that you can hold companies to account.
Yes.
Why does it matter? Because then investors have the right information. Back to the point about misinformation, how do you make a rational decision if you're trying to figure out, is it real, is it fake, or is it fiction? And I'm afraid there's a lot of this world that's about fiction at the moment.
Well, I think that's the opportunity you were teeing up, which is, again, to talk about facts instead of the fiction and the individual decision makers that are winning. We have a particular example in Florida where we have been serving the school district of Hillsborough County. It's the 7th largest school district in the country. There are 220,000 students that run through the buildings every day. The real estate is the size of Central Park in New York. They came to us because they wanted to upgrade fluorescent lights into LED lights. It was a $40 million project. They didn't want to borrow, and they didn't want to spend the money, and they didn't want to operate it because they're not infrastructure operators, and they really don't have the budget to do this. So we said, all right, we'll do this for you. It's obviously a huge cost savings to you on an operating cost basis if we install these lighting, this efficient lighting. Started with a $40 million project. They gave us a 25-year contract. It looks like an infrastructure kind of opportunity for us. That $40 million over the last 4 years has turned into $530 million worth of upgrades. We have received terrific economic returns, but what's most important, as we've done HVAC systems and lighting upgrades and energy management and solar, is that they've saved 30% on their energy bill without any capital risk, without any operating risk, right? And that money is going into the classrooms. Teachers are getting paid better because you can actually increase teacher salaries when you increase the budget for the classroom. And furthermore, the students have a temperature-controlled climate in their classrooms in a humid environment. They have good lighting, so they're not distracted. Test scores have gone up.
Wow.
Tell me what's wrong with that picture.
It's phenomenal. Why then, if we're seeing brilliant outcomes for the customer, boardrooms who are more enlightened, who are inputting it into their DNA, which we've discussed earlier on as well. And I want to come back to the shareholder side of things as well, because I'm really concerned, because I think it was Larry Fink a couple of years ago wrote this great letter. And he, wow, one of the biggest managers of money is on board, on the planet. This is brilliant. It's gonna, and then Mark Carney was making great strides of getting all these amazing financial institutions into GFANs, and they were all signing up to global financial initiatives. And then, dare I say it, certain politicians in the States, and this was at a state level, started thinking, no, that's discriminatory against this, that's discriminatory against it. And why did then the financiers back down in the face of the trend that's been happening, that's culminated in Donald Trump being elected? Why did they back down rather than stick to their guns? Because if one thing the politicians understand, it's the power of money. And for me, that's quite sad. I don't mind the fact that things change, they change their mind, but the fact that they backed down when actually there was a clear investment case for going with this. Does anyone want to go there on this one?
Because it's not that easy. We can sit here for the whole day and tell you a lot of good stories like this. They remain anecdotes. Good anecdotes, but they remain anecdotes. We need critical mass. We need that. We need
$9 trillion of critical mass.
That's it. So we need to have all in my manufacturing assets. I need to have an ecosystem around me because I don't do energy. I need it affordable, right? The whole year, right? Reliable, etc. So I need to build that critical mass to allow me to move ahead. So without, I think you talked about private-public partnership is so important, right? To have that public partnership. It's so important to curb the curve of the cost. Green hydrogen, I cannot use it today in Europe at €6 a kilo or 7. I need it at 1, right? But it takes time. And innovation is going to come. We know it. That's the history of humanity, right? So I think that's the point. You need patience. You need to get innovation to work. And you're right. I think what we miss is the regulatory recognition. I mean, in all what we've done, I cannot say that there is a re-rating in my company due to all the good job we've done, right, on sustainability. But again, we do it because it's profitable. We do it because it makes sense for us. And we do it, the measurements are important. That's what CDP and SBTI, we got SBTI certified as well recently. It's important that external benchmarks are there to really, you know, compare peers and tell you if what we are doing is the right thing.
But can I just maybe come in as well, Steve? So you asked, why are they stepping back? So one of the things I ponder is, are they stepping back because they weren't really in it for real? Or is it that they were worried about the backlash of what was going to happen? But my hypothesis is this, that actually you're going to continue. So, you know, I think the castle on the hill is in the same place. But what's changed is how people are going to walk there. And that's really, really important. So I think there will be a less noisy narrative around some of these topics, partly because of the backlash. But the castle on the hill, the 2030 to the 2050 goals are absolutely there. And it's going to be many of the same people quietly tiptoeing around.
What I was going to say,
that's true.
and Sanda and Scott, we'll come to this with both of you. Are they actually stepping back, but they're just being less noisy about their investments?
It's a different
now?
language.
So watch what I'm actually doing rather than what I'm actually saying. It's the metaphor for WEF, isn't it, really? Watch what people are actually doing rather than saying.
The way to virtue signal has changed, right? The political environment has changed. What you need to say to attract the right kind of attention in a different audience has changed. I think that, you know, again, these people do like to make money, as you said, and they're going to continue to make money. The language that they use will be quite different. But I do think, you know, the most controversial point is the one we need to put on the table, which is incumbents can buy politicians and challengers can't. And so by definition, you have an imbalance, an asymmetry of power when you have incumbent industries that are incredibly rich.
And to take a line out of what I'm thinking about my next panel is, Big Broccoli does not have a big lobbying operation on Washington. But my goodness me, we all know that broccoli is powerful. But unfortunately, it doesn't make as much money as, dare I say, a lot of the opposition they're up against as well. Sanda, we've been talking about this very much in the European and US premise. So I think that's really important that you give us that global perspective as well, because, again, you've talked one damning piece of evidence is that a lot of money was promised for the global south and it hasn't turned up. And I've been there during the torturous negotiations. Christiana Figueres, who became a good friend as well. She said it was like herding cats, trying to get them all in the room. And then they got the deal and then they didn't deliver the money afterwards.
That's it. And it's happened year on year on year. And it, you know, I think, you know, new funds are created. I think in the last call we talked about the loss and damage fund, but we still haven't really, you know, fulfill the commitments on earlier funds as well. So, you know, and I think this is really the opportunity where I think, you know, we work with our private sector players. We're like, well, okay, you know, what can they do with private capital? What can companies do with their balance sheets? Because, you know, the resolution and the determination is there. I think, as you said, the language will be different. And the thing is, and we were talking about this backstage as well, is that, you know, we want us all to be climate conscious, but there is a tipping point. 80% of the emissions come from the G20. So if we could get a significant amount of large players to just get us to where we need to get to in terms of those targets, that's one piece. And then we can work on the rest. I think you talked about herding cats. We don't always have to do everything together, but let's do the things that will give us the most possible impact. And I think politics is giving us such a fractured sense, whereas we know what we need to do and where the points are. Because, you know, even the anxiety and angst from the Global South is simply because they're the recipient. They're, you know, the least emissions come from there, but they're most impacted by climate action. And I think just getting that focus on that 80% emission for me is what we really, really do need to do.
Ilham, you come then Katherine.
Yeah, but then you have to do it right.
Absolutely, no. You have to do
The
it right. Yeah.
European drama is a lack of competitiveness.
Yeah.
Actually, the good story is BYD in China.
I was going to mention China.
It's counterintuitive to think about an EV car, and it took them 20 years to build it, right?
Yeah.
Is a lower total cost of ownership. And I did a test drive I drove German cars all my life. It's a good car. It's good looking. It have a lower cost, battery. And it's actually now competing with the best available technologies in Europe and eating lunch of European car manufacturers.
Yeah.
So you have to do it right. The how matters.
But Ilham, that's a brilliant point. Before Katherine and Scott come in as well on this one as well. But it's all very well Europe saying, oh, looking at that and looking incredibly jealously at these amazing vehicles that are coming in. They're stunningly cheap, and we'll put a big tariff on it, and that'll prevent them coming in. But actually, that's not going to help the consumer. That's not going to help the customer. Why don't we actually make it easier to buy European cars that are of an equivalent standard, or actually make it easier for those manufacturers to make them in Wolfsburg or wherever it may well be, if it's Volkswagen or whoever as well, rather than making it more punitive, because you're not going to get more adoption for what you want by putting higher taxes on a Chinese vehicle. Rather than more tariffs there, make it easier here to buy and build European cars. Is it that obvious?
I think at the end of the day, it needs to be a better car. It needs to be a better value proposition.
It needs better mileage in the winter as well.
I mean, but
I don't know how many of you have got an EV, but
it is instructive to
like a
think,
hybrid.
Consumer Reports called the Tesla Model 3 the best car ever made, ever reviewed, right? And then they said the same thing about the Tesla Model Y. Well, the Model Y is now the #1 selling car on earth. It's because customers want it, because customers get something better from it than the alternative. They're outselling every German manufacturer by a lot. They're outselling even the BYD vehicles still. And that will change soon because BYD's value proposition is quite compelling. But we have to remember, it was a better car, just no caveats. It was a better car, and that's why people bought it.
So I was actually going to take us back to the question you asked the audience earlier, which is Trump going to be better or worse for Europe, and are people feeling optimistic and trying to bring the global view in? So although I'm based in London, my day job at GIB is representing a firm based in the Gulf region. And I think actually what's unfolding in global politics is going to be really good for other parts of the world beyond US and Europe. And I think the Gulf region is a really interesting case in point, in part because there is a burning need to tackle some of these issues. I mean, climate change is very real in that part of the world. But secondly, there is will. There's political will, and there is a demographic will. We know that that is a part of the world where 70% of the population are under the age of 30. And I tell you, they care about this. And the number of amazing entrepreneurs who are really trying to tackle some of these global issues, particularly on this topic, totally blows my mind. And so I think, what one place is perhaps going to lose out on, I just think opens a whole sea of opportunities for people. And I really have lost count of the number of times people say to me, oh, I've been offered a job by this or that firm in the region or in Saudi. Should I take it? And I say, go, because it's exciting. You may not want to stay there forever, but there's some amazing things happening, amazing projects, amazing people. So I think that's one of the things that just gives me hope, because it's not all about the US anymore. There are other parts of the world that are really growing and very, very determined.
But it's also about mindset, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you can walk past 20 AI operations on the top drag here in Davos as well. But I can almost guarantee that 18 of them are probably not going to be here in 5 years' time, or they're right, because the excitement around AI is right. And, the winners are going to reap enormous benefits. But as much as a lot of companies can make real money out of this, do we need more of a VC mindset? Do you know what? Some of these are not going to work, but the one or two bets we do are going to be exponential. And it's the same with AI, and it's the same with a lot of these semiconductor technologies as well. Whereas in climate, in the transition technologies, that didn't work, I'm not going to do any of the others. And maybe there's a little bit of that from those investors as well. Those investors who, I don't know if they were ever in it properly, I think one of you said, but they're being less noisy now. But actually, do they need to just have an attitude where we're going to make some failures, but my goodness me, the one or two that we do back that are going to make it are going to be phenomenal. For instance, in green hydrogen.
In green hydrogen, but Gen AI it's an opportunity
Yeah.
for my industry. I have now a VC, an entrepreneur department called Syensqo.ai, trying to apply AI into the chemical industry. One pillar is productivity and make the invisible visible and cut the waste. It's amazing because from unstructured data, you can make sense of it. And the second one is innovation in the lab, in the R&D labs, right? Because in the old days, I used to do 100 experiments, fail in 80, and then focus on 20. Now the machine, you train the machine, and the machine becomes your brother and sister in doing the experiments and avoiding doing mistakes, right? So Gen AI, it's an opportunity, I believe. Now, remember that Gen AI needs energy. You know, OpenAI, ChatGPT consumes equivalent 17,000 times kilowatt hour of
So the
an
solution is
average
part of the problem
American.
as well.
Absolutely. And this emits 60 round trips, New York, Tokyo, daily, right? So Gen AI is an opportunity. It's going to become probably one of the largest greenhouse gas emission emitters. We're in the cooling. So it's an opportunity for my company because we are in the coolant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, opportunities, and you need to mitigate those challenges. So Gen AI needs energy. It's going to compete with the industries, and it's going to emit emissions. And guess what? Those people who are building the data service today, they need to be agnostic to 4 years mandate of any political leader because it's going to stay for the next 20 to 40 years, like our assets do.
I do want to ask Sanda one question before I go into the final round as well. And Sanda, how do we maintain our objectivity regarding SDGs as well? Because sustainable development goals are so important to this whole process. How do we have this twin track of solving all of these technological problems as well and staying true to our SDGs?
It's not easy. Yeah. I don't think there's a really simple answer to it. But the thing that keeps me focused or determined around the SDGs is I say, well, look at the state of the world right now. And if we didn't have the SDGs, then what? So we do have a framework. I think the last 4 to 5 years have been more complex than anyone would have possibly imagined.
Why have they been more complex?
Because everything that hit us, no matter where you are, we came through a pandemic.
Yeah.
The climate crisis worsened. There's been cost of capital challenges. There's been conflict. I think a lot of European economies also, heavily weighed under because of that. Fine, we've seen some solutions in the Middle East, but it's been, I think, a heavy 4 to 5 years.
It has.
And all of those.
But there's always that, though, isn't there?
I think
I've seen about the great financial crisis before that.
It was a deep confluence of,
Yeah.
and I think from us who've been sort of looking at the SDGs, there was progress. Not in all, up until 4 to 5 years ago, we were far behind, but the 4 to 5 years set us even further back. And I think there's a couple of things that continue to set us back. I think, issues such as the inability to come together to agree collectively on a couple of things, continued cost of capital piece. We've been talking a lot about regionalization and nationalism. It's happening for various economic reasons. That may help drive perhaps, local national goals, but perhaps not keeping the focus on what we need to achieve as a collective. And so, yeah, the goals are far behind. We acknowledge that. And it's 5 years to go, actually. Our call to action simply is, let's keep focus on that. Imagine a future. Be determined, because optimism isn't, it's not going to get us there. But we just need determination now and better collaboration to get it done.
I've done something amazing. I've suddenly managed to make all of you, just for a couple of minutes, the most powerful man or woman on the planet. Let's call you Elon Musk. No, sorry.
No, thanks.
But I'm going to go down the line, and I'm going to start over there, and I'm going to move down to Ilham here as well. You've got one thing you're allowed to do while you've got your genie lamp. You've got one wish as well. One thing that's really going to actually be the next level that's going to take us back on track. It's going to get us back on the scale electric as well. What is it, Scott?
Well, we often talk about there's no silver bullet when, the economy is as complex as it is, and net zero is a complicated problem to solve. But there actually is one silver bullet, and that's to price carbon. And I know we never want to talk about that,
yeah.
But if you price carbon, you create the demand signal, you actually create the economic incentive, and you can pay for what you need to do to transition by internalizing the externalities of our polluting systems.
Is there any chance of a worldwide carbon pricing scheme anytime soon?
I don't know about anything worldwide. I think the idea that 193 or whatever countries would come together and agree on anything is pretty far-fetched. But I do actually go back to the intergenerational transition that's underway. And I don't think it's today, but I do think that a carbon price has to happen, or some version of a price on the pollution, so that we can actually internalize the cost of the healthcare, the cost of war, and the cost of these other externalities that we're facing as a result of our current system.
Carbon pricing, Sanda?
Right, because he sort of touched on something I was going to go into. I'm going to talk about, I think, the power that lies behind things that we don't see. And I just think that there's a lot of politics at play that has made a lot of the systems that we work in inefficient. So if I had a day, I'll just reimagine politics. I'd reimagine politics that allows markets to flow, the right decisions to be made, and customers to really be that voice that holds everybody to account, customers and citizens. So it'd be around reimagining the actual system or the ecosystem within which we're in. I don't know that anyone has it perfect right now, but I know that there's something to fix in that.
Reimagine the mechanisms of politics and just basically bang people's heads together and make them see sense. Katherine?
Well, I would totally agree with the carbon point.
You can't have that one. It's already
I'm not going to take that one. I would say leverage and value innovation. Because I think innovation is at the heart of this. And if we can crack it, and when I say value, it's not just put a monetary value on it, but get people to think that it's worth it.
And Ilham?
Carbon pricing, I cannot take it because we did it inside the company. It's gone.
Innovation's gone.
Tackle.
Changing the politicians, that's gone.
I know. No, I have one. Is tackle inequalities, because it's about people and people and people. Because if I am, in distress, if I'm poor, I worry about the end of the month, not the end of the world.
Yeah, no, all fantastic points. Look, here's something else. You're all here listening to how we can get onto the path of net zero. I'll set a challenge for every single one of you, and you're not going to be accountable to anyone but yourself. Go and do something. Go and make a decision to do one little thing. And then suddenly that's 100 of us who have done one little thing. And then you can do another little thing, and baby steps. So I'm going to go and think about one thing I can do that actually just, maybe it's how I buy my groceries, or maybe it's whether I walk further or drive less, whatever. But let's all just do one little thing. And then if we all do a lot of little things, who knows what we can do. I want to thank all of you. I want to thank Scott Jacobs. It's been a real pleasure meeting you, sir. Sanda, Ojiambo, lovely to see you again. Some fantastic points as well. Katherine, Garrett, Cox, always good to see you, and thank you. And Ilham, Kadri, you're one of the rocks of all my panels, and I love it as well. But thank you very much indeed to all of you for listening in as well.
Thank you. Thank you.